to a little late start, a little bit. But what we're doing today is we are discussing the importance of literacy in our community. Every time we do a live, we always start with what I'm reading now. And I'll be honest with you all, I haven't decided yet. So I just finished up with a book called "The Falsification of African Consciousness: Eurocentric History and the Effects That It Has on Us." Don't think I have it around me right now. Written by Amos N. Wilson. And it is a book that focuses on the way that we are presented with historical information in school, right? So we are presented with information from a Eurocentric point of view, which distorts our African consciousness, because what it does is it implants the Eurocentric history as the standard, right? So once it inputs this information as the standard, we compare everything to a Eurocentric point of view because we make that the norm. And so what the book displays is how, when we learn African history later on in life, we are constantly comparing it to a Eurocentric history because we learn that so early in our development, in our mental development. And it speaks about how in college and in high school, we are given European history as a core class, right? So when you're given that as a core class, what then happens is in your mind, that is important, right? So you internalize that sense of inferiority because African history is not presented as a core class. It's either given as an elective or it's not even offered. And since we hold our educators and adults in such high regard, then we think that they know what's best for us and they want to give us the best education possible. So if they do not offer us the African history aspect, even in the history classes, we're not even presented with like a semester of African history. So we take that inferiority complex and we internalize it. And that book really breaks that down. It's a wonderful book. I'm a little upset I don't have it right next to me. I just finished it, like I said. It's a wonderful book, but right now I'm trying to decide what my next read will be. But anyway, without further ado, let's bring my man Chief Bookman on and have this discussion about the importance of literacy and literary information in our community. Let me bring my man on here. I had to get the introduction out the way about what I'm reading. I'll have a more in-depth discussion of the book later. My man, how you doing?
I'm amazing. How are you?
I'm all right. I can't complain at all. I appreciate you for joining me on this Sunday.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite, brother. Thank you.
No problem at all. So for anybody who might not know of you, can you kind of give us an introduction of you?
Yeah, real quick. My name is Jonathan Beatty. I'm better known as Chief Bookman. I am the founder of the I Love Books Company, which is an apparel brand that promotes a love for reading, literacy, learning. And with every product we sell, we give a new book to one of our nonprofit partners to give to a child in need. And I'm also the founder of Book by Book, which is a newly formed nonprofit organization with the same mission to end illiteracy one book at a time. So really on a mission to promote this message of literacy, because it's one of the root causes to a lot of our problems, especially for Black and brown people, in particular Black Americans. The United States is the only country not to allow those enslaved to learn how to read, and there's a reason for that. So that's it. Spent a lot of time in corporate. My background is in corporate finance. Went to the University of Kentucky, all of the education stuff, and I left corporate to pursue this vision full time a couple years ago. Okay,
so like even before leaving corporate, how long have you been in the space? With I Love Books and with the new company you just formed.
Yeah. So my first glimpse into this space was in 2015. So I left California. I was working in corporate in California in 2014, and I left the first time to start my first business, which was called Servanta. And I wanted to partner nonprofits with socially conscious businesses, and realized after about a year that that wasn't really going to get me to where I wanted to go. And then a friend of mine who's pursuing a PhD in literacy was telling me that 67% of kids in low income homes don't have books. And then all of the data that I'm sure you're aware, like how many kids don't have books and what that means when they don't have books and what it means when they're not reading at grade level by fourth grade. So that's really, so I guess that would be 7, almost 8 years in this game, with a short step away because I went back into corporate in 2017, a little bit before the pandemic, and then I left again. So I jumped once and then jumped again a little later, but it's about almost 8 years in this space now.
Okay. So like, you know, a lot of times we have like a turning point.
Mm-hmm.
We just decide, hey, you know, there's a problem that I want to try to help with. But even before you spoke with the friend that was going for their PhD, like what was the moment when you just said, hey, you know, this is an issue that I really want to dive into?
Yeah. Okay. So now we get to the I'm trying to be short, but let me expound on it a little bit.
Follow me. Follow me.
So I grew up in the poorest region of the country, a small southeastern city called Hazard. And I've always had, my parents taught me education was the way that I was going to have a better life. Neither one of them went to college, but me and my 3 siblings, we knew that there was no other option other than education. And I went and got my MBA from the University of Kentucky, went to work for Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati, spent 7 years there, and then pursued my lifelong dream of living in the Bay Area. So in 2013, I moved out to the Bay. And that moment that you're talking about, I, of course, will never forget. I remember leaving my Oakland Hills, comfortable Oakland Hills home, and taking the BART, which is the subway system, into the city. And I saw just rows and rows of our homeless brothers and sisters there. And I'm watching all these people with all this money, all this wealth. We're just walking by them every day. And then one day I was leaving work for lunch, and I saw a lady eating out of a trash can. And then she moved over to the sidewalk and, for lack of better words, used the bathroom. And I had never seen any of this. Mind you, I grew up in a trailer park, 6 people in a single wide back in the 80s. So I've seen low income, but I've never seen that level of poverty, and I never saw homelessness. So I realized that I, Jonathan, am part of the problem, because instead of using my gifts and my talents, my time, my treasure, all of those things that I could do to make an impact, I was giving that back to these corporations instead of giving it back to the people. And so that was my first time. That was my first time really getting into that conviction, if you will. 2013, and then 2014, I had a decision to make. I was getting, the lease on my home was getting ready to expire, and I knew that I didn't want to stay in the Bay. I was getting ready to move back to Kentucky, and it was a choice of whether I was going to stay working in corporate or if I was going to take that jump and start something, not knowing what I was doing. But that's when I took that leap, was in 2014, moved back to Kentucky, started the business and all of that. But seeing homelessness in San Francisco, California, if you're familiar with the Bay Area, or really any major metro, you're going to see real poverty. And once I got back, and that kind of leads into getting told that the literacy is part of homelessness, or one of the root causes of homelessness as well. So being an analyst by trade, my goal was to look at the root cause analysis and say, why is this happening? And then what can I do to create the change that I want to see?
I got you. Yeah. So like, that's very, somewhat similar to the reason that we started the Black Book Club. Mm. Whereas, you know, growing up, my mom, I always talk about this. My mom, she reads 3 books at one time, right? Mm. Like, that's just how she's always been. My brother was probably the first male that I saw that was in the books. Mm. He was in like the 9th grade. You know, this is back in the early 90s. And he's in the 9th grade. When everyone wants to be tough, he's just over here reading a book. And so, you know, he's my hero. So I'm like, okay, this must be pretty cool. So I started reading a little bit, and then I just completely disregarded books, right? I'm outside, right? So Then I get to high school, and because reading was so instrumental in my house, my mother's in the military, so we were military children, so we moved around. So I'm in Germany, and I get into advanced English. My mom's big on the ability to read, right? So I get into advanced English, and we start getting assigned readings. We had to read like a book a week, and the books I hated them. I just couldn't stand them. I didn't relate to any of the books that were offered to me. So because I held my teacher in such high regard, because hey, we're young, we think the teachers know best. So I'm like, well, if this teacher's saying this book is a classic, right? They're telling me this is one of the best books written ever, and I don't like it, then I must not like reading, right? So all through, 10th grade, 11th grade, senior high school, I'm not reading books. I'm just not. And then I get to college, and I start to realize kind of the difference between books that I relate to and the books that I was given. You know what I mean? I started to find out more about James Baldwin, about Toni Morrison. And I remember having this epiphany. I got really, really mad one day because I'm reading a James Baldwin book, and I'm looking online, and I see him compared to Toni Morrison. Then I see Zora Neale Hurston. Then I see, Ralph Ellison. And I'm like, where were these authors when I was a kid? I know these books were written in the 70s, some in the 60s. I know they were around. How is it that me graduating high school in '02 in an English class that is supposed to be great, in a school district that is supposed to be a very highly regarded school district, how is it that I'm not offered? I wasn't even told about these books. I pick on this book all the time. I was given Of Mice and Men, right? And hey, this is a wonderful book. I'm given Edgar Allan Poe, and I'm like, these books, I don't like them. I'm not going to say they're terrible. I didn't relate to them. Yep. So I'm in college, and I'm like, I have to work twice as hard to get to point zero, to where somebody who was a junior could have been at if they were given these books as options. And that's when I started to realize about like outside influence, right? Because my mom loves books. To this day, she'll come over here, she'll take 5 of my books, and I know I'm never going to see them again. She's going to keep them. She's a reader. My brother is a big reader. So it's not like in the home it wasn't praised. It's that outside influence, right? Where if I wasn't given books, I wasn't given this Toni Morrison book and said, hey, just sit down and read this. I wasn't given. So I didn't think it was that cool. I knew my brother did it. He was cool, but the outside influence comes in. So I'm like, if I can provide some of that outside influence back into reading, and then I can give you a Ralph Ellison book, I can give you a Walter Mosley book that you're going to relate to, right? Then I can kind of bridge that gap between that 15 to 22 dead zone where a lot of kids don't fall out of love for reading. Then you get 23, 24, you got a family, you got so many other options, so many other things to do, and then we get 30, 33, and we're not reading books on a regular basis. Then we're not reading in front of our children. Then our children are not reading. So it's just like a big circle.
Yep.
So I'm like, how can I help? So that's what, we started the Black Book Club for, because we wanted to kind of break that barrier between a book nerd and a quote unquote cool kid.
Yeah.
As young men, we spend a lot, and women, but I can only speak for men, we spend a lot of time trying to be cool, right? We want to be cool. And so we hide some of that nerdiness in us. Black people are geniuses.
Yeah.
So we naturally have some nerdiness, but we think it's not cool, that's not hip, blah, 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 blah. And I just wanted to kind of break that stigma up. So that's what that's why we came here.
Man, that's a lot in there, because you're speaking on the issues that we still see today. And the fact that you're talking about your mother and your brother being a reader, and it wasn't coming from the home, which is an issue for a lot of kids, especially if it's, someone's functionally illiterate, it's going to be a generational cycle in a lot of cases. Yep. So the fact that that wasn't the case, it really highlights the importance of the outside influence and the availability of books of interest for kids, and that goes across the board, you know, whether obviously we're talking about Black people, Black men in particular, but if you are from Eastern Kentucky and they were to put James Baldwin in front of you, you may not be interested in that. But of course, us, that's not the case. They get a wide variety. We don't get the same. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. Now, I'm a big fan of Nipsey Hussle, and in one of his interviews, he talked about how his mom was putting him on. She was about books too. And for those that don't know, Nip he also was a genius, just like you, and I would say a lot of us as well. But he was reading Double XL. He was reading The Source. He was reading things that were of interest to him because that's what works. And unfortunately, you said that 15 to 22 dead zone, that's when we stop losing it. And if you don't continue that habit of reading through that period, once you do get 24, 25, you have a family, especially now with all the distractions that we have, it's going to be really difficult to catch back up and really consider yourself a real reader. So I appreciate you sharing that, man. It's a very interesting situation. My father was in the military. I'm also a preacher's kid. So I saw a man reading early. Like it was normal for men to read. My mom was an avid reader as well, but I don't think I really got on my current reading journey until like the pandemic. And that's when it really shifted. And I started looking at books of interest to me and got back into reading, started reading for personal development, reading for consciousness, reading for the book that I saw one of your previous posts talking about the Eurocentric teachings and all of that. And I knew you were talking about where you're from and everything, and I was giving you that background of being from Kentucky. That's 100% it, man. And sometimes I feel like I slipped through the cracks just because that was not what was coming in. So it's very important to highlight the need for relevant books, and they'll call it culturally relevant books now, I guess, in the education world, but absolutely needed. So glad that you have found it, and glad that you are helping other people. We need it, man.
Yeah, like you said, you know, first of all, the poverty that, you know, when you read that a low literacy level can cost somebody $1 billion in their life, right? And we only think about literacy as just sitting down and reading a book, but it can be reading your prescription bottle. It's reading emails that you're sent. You know what I mean? And really reading and understanding. And it can cost you $1 billion. Like you said, 75% of people in prisons don't read above a fourth grade level. 60% of Americans don't read above a 6th grade level. We're talking about 30-year-olds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just that the avenues that a high literacy level can take are really boundless. And a lot of times, I think, in my opinion, that the cultural relevant books are kept away from us to keep our natural inquisitiveness low, right? If I don't give you a Ralph Ellison book so you can identify as a Black man in America how he feels on Invisible Man, right? So you can kind of put words to how you feel in certain moments. If I don't give you a James Baldwin book, a Love on Beale Street, so you can see how Black love just really is the most powerful weapon, right? To keep this Elaine Brown book away from you, so that you understand the strength of the Black Panther Party. That way I can then come behind and I can just give you these images, these very surface level images of the Black Panther Party, so that you don't really understand what they were doing. You don't understand the community impact. You just see guys with guns. But if I can give you this Huey P. Newton book, you can understand. Right. You know what I mean? And then you can read his words. You can read Malcolm X's words where they're against homophobia. But if I just tell you these are them and they're against homophobia, you don't do your reading. I mean, they're for homophobia. Right. You don't do your reading. You don't understand that. No, they weren't. They were completely against it. You know what I mean? So I think that when they kind of cut off, I say they, I mean culturally, they cut us off at the head, and then they give us all these distractions, right? Yeah. And then if they do that, they can lead us wherever they want to lead us.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the scary part, man, is the amount of control that they have that we don't even know. And when I say we in this context, it's not you or me or the readers out there. It's the vast majority of people that don't know they're being controlled. They don't know how this thing is working. And I believe that it's a 3-step process for the system to do what the system does. And it's just divide, distract, conquer. That's it. Divide, distract, conquer. And the divide isn't necessarily even amongst the people. That's a big part of it. But dividing, like you were saying, dividing the books away from the people, distracting them with all the other methods of entertainment that we have. And in our world today, we also have a challenge because the attention span continues to decrease. So to the ability to sit down and actually focus, which is a superpower in this day now, just to be able to sit down for an hour without having to be on your phone, without having to feel like you need to check social and all those things. It's mind-boggling to me. I'm really concerned that we don't think this is an issue, and it's one of the most significant issues of this generation. And here in Louisville, Kentucky, 90% of Black boys don't read at grade level. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I know statistically speaking where these young men are going. It's only a couple of options, and they're not good options. So why are we here? How did we get here? And then you start thinking about all the things that led to this: the poverty, the youngins having kids in poverty, having generational illiteracy, having it like this. And those kids have, and you just got this cycle, and then you've got 12th graders reading at second grade, first grade levels. How are we here? Why is this not a siren that's being sounded across the United States and abroad as well, but definitely here in the States, and specifically for Black people? Like we're at a massive deficit, and I don't quite understand why we're not speaking on it at a macro level. Just this should be the generational issue of our time that we actually solve. It's very much a solvable thing, but you've got to, that part, man. I'm still trying to figure that one out. How do you do it? It goes back to what you said earlier. We're trying to be cool, but at the same time, being a nerd, how do you balance that? How do we figure out how to connect the kids and connect this literacy thing in such a way that lets them know you said earlier, it's $1 billion. You could have $1 billion idea that you can't execute because you can't read. You could be going to the grocery store eating things that kill you because you can't read. You could, all these other things. And so kudos to you, man. I want to make sure I say that, give you your flowers, as they say now, because I think you and the people that are in this game making an impact are extremely important. And want to make sure that I say that before I keep going on to the other stuff. It's a lot.
I appreciate it. I know when I started an Instagram. First of all, I don't take selfies, right? I'm not a selfie guy. So I swore off Instagram forever. Mm-hmm. Wife was on it. She's like, this is a social media tool. I'm like, I don't do pictures. I don't. So then when I started this one for the books, I was amazed at how many other people are in this same fight that we're in, right? Mm-hmm. Across the country, everyone, and then we're all trying to do our part. And if we can all just work together, we can cause a huge impact. You know what I mean? I'm seeing people that they do, and it's that barrier where they're breaking it down. They're showing memes, and they're showing, one thing I always try to make sure is that I show that I listen to rap music. You know what I mean? I'm not just a guy that's in the room reading books all day. I listen to this, I listen to Jay-Z. Because a lot of those things, that's how culturally we connect, right? So we connect like that, and then I can show you, hey, check this book. Mm-hmm. I meet guys all the time. They're like, well, I don't really read that much, and then I'm like, well, why not? Like, I can never find anything that I'm interested in, and I every time I hear that, I see myself 19. I'm like, I don't do that shit because there's nothing out there for me to read. Then I can be the person who I wish And my brother tried. I just didn't listen to him. You know what I mean? He's like, you can read this. I'm whatever. But I can be that person to say, well, check this Muhammad Ali book out. You know what I mean? Hey,
Yeah.
check this. And then they don't have to all be autobiographies, right? Check this Walter Mosley book out. This is a fiction book. And, you know, as a kid, I know when I was in Americus, Georgia, I graduated from school in Americus. And a lot of people who I was hanging out with, they were out, you know, they were in the city. They didn't go to school. And they had never left that area. You know what I mean? They had never left the small country of Americus, Georgia.
Yeah.
They didn't know anybody else that left Americus, Georgia. That was the norm. We're born here, we live here, we die here. And just think about the power of imagination. If they read a book about a black kid in Paris, and they're like, maybe they don't go to Paris, maybe they go to Chicago,
Right.
but they get out of their immediate area because they're given a book that could be an avenue to help their imagination.
Yeah, 100%. That imagination thing, man, is vital. And it's hard because we're used to using our senses, especially if you're living in a tough situation. It's hard not to see what you see. But if you can escape that by reading these words and visualizing the story and putting yourself into the story itself, and just thinking about what life could be, that gives inspiration and hope, which is vital in this life. If you want to be successful, you got to be hopeful, got to be able to see something different in the future if you're not happy with where you're at right now. And I love what you said about you're just showing, I would look at it as showing your humanity and your interest, which is music. And I think a lot of black people enjoy music, myself included. So, excuse me, one of the things that I'm typically in is a hoodie. I make music. I have an I Love Books anthem. We went in, gave hundreds of books away at a school in Lexington, and shot a music video with all these kids having these books, and just trying to find unique ways. But I think the music thing is key, because music is so powerful. If we could, show them both, excuse me, that you are a music lover, you're a book lover, you can be the two. It shows you can merge those things. Excuse me. And then for me as a creator, I actually love music to the point where I write music and make videos and all of that stuff. So it's continuing to show what's possible and provide and be an inspiration, be the example for these kids. And not even just the kids, I think the adults too, who may not see themselves and identify themselves as readers. Just, being the example and continuing to talk about it, continuing to push the message.
Yeah, I remember Toni Morrison interview that she said how revolutionary Black imagination is. And she compared it to, she's like, how do you think our ancestors decided to run off the plantation? It's only imagination, because they're born in that plantation. Everyone that they know is on that plantation. Their mother, father on that plantation. So how do you think they decided that there has to be something better for me outside of these walls? It's imagination. She's like, the only thing that they could hold on to when they're going through rivers and they're running in wet clothes and they're running from dogs and all these things, the only thing you can hold on to is Black love and Black imagination. That's it. Because that's the only thing they could say, this is what I'm running for, is because I think in my mind, 2 states over, things will be better for me.
Yeah.
The only thing is imagination. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So talk to me about how, like, the building part of the company, right, of I Love Books, like your first 2 years, what was that like to you?
Oh, man. So I'm actually coming up on the 2nd year. So I launched in 2021, spring of 2021. So I'm coming up on the 2nd year. It's been an interesting journey. So conceptually, if you've heard of Warby Parker or Tom Shoes, it's a social enterprise. They do good with profits, and that it's the same with us. But I think, let me go back and answer the question. So it's been great. We've given 3,000 new books to
Wow.
kids, which puts my personal donation at almost 15,000 over the last few years. What I have noticed is there are groups of people who get it, and groups of people who are still getting it, if you will. And I think that that's leading me into, I haven't shared this part publicly just yet, but I'm actually finishing up my first children's book. So what will
Wow.
happen going forward is I've written half a dozen books already that no one knows about other than just you in this conversation. First time I've shared it with anybody outside of my family. And instead of giving the other books that I've been giving, I'm going to start giving my own, which will address some of the pricing that's different. So it's books are expensive. That's the other thing too. Good books, solid books can be expensive. So I will be able to produce those for cheap, give more books, and those books will be culturally relevant as well. So it's been good. Very grateful. I feel like we're starting to get more traction now. We've been able to have partnerships. Last year, at the end of the year, we had a partnership with one of my former employers, which was Amazon. So they gave us a few thousand, got those books out, planning to do much, much bigger, many more things this year. And then in Lexington, just sat down with the Department of Education. So getting ready to start looking at their new teaching mandates and seeing if we can help create curriculum and a lot just different, almost like ancillary businesses outside of just the merch. Very similar. Are you familiar with Earn Your Leisure,
Yeah.
Troy and Rashad?
Watch
Yeah,
it all the
so
time. Yeah.
so similar to that, I'll be launching the podcast. So it's going to be, I Love Books is the spoke in the middle, the hub, if you will, and then we'll have the podcast, we'll have the merch, we'll have the books, we'll have the nonprofit, and it will just be its full circle. So my goal is to just create this ecosystem of literacy-based curriculum. I want to start teaching entrepreneurship curriculum, which of course you got to be able to read if you're going to be an entrepreneur as well, so on and so on. So it's been a journey, but I'm looking forward to this year. I think this is going to be one of the best years that we've had so far, and set us up for a great 2024.
Yeah. And that's very impressive. 15,000 books. Hey, that's nothing at all to sneeze at. That's big time. I love to hear about that. And I remember the first time I came across your page, and you were speaking so passionately about a book you were about to read, right? And I just remember seeing, looking in your eyes, you're looking in the camera, and you're just like, I'm going to love this book. You just spoke with such a reverence of literature, right? That you had no choice but to respect it. Like how you brought up Earn Your Leisure. They talk about finances in a way that you're going to listen, right? You know that you're going to pull something from that. So when you make these like videos, right? Talk about what was the beginning part of your social media presence, and then some of the things that you've learned along the way as far as building this community and this ecosystem that you're putting together.
Yeah, man. So when I first got on Instagram, TikTok is actually my biggest social platform right now. And Instagram is kind of like I guess, secondary, based lack of better words, it's my secondary platform. But the journey just started with wanting to give book reviews. So that's what I wanted to do, which is probably what you're talking about, and seeing me speak in a camera, talk about a book I'm reading or that I've read, recommend any of those things. And I wanted I know that people don't read. So if I just step back and say, what is my purpose? What is my intention? I know that people don't read. I know that I can't convince them to read, but they want or need the lessons from the books. So if I've already read the books and I had the information, I just give that information back to the people. And that will be the value that I create for them. And if they're interested, then they can go get the book themselves. They can read up about it. If they want to know more, they can ask me questions, and I'll respond to all of those with my perspective. But really, it just started with trying to show people, one, I actually do read, and that adults read and Black men read, and all of those stereotypes are being broken. And then, look, if you want to understand that your mind is a mental garden, then you need to read As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. It will help you connect the dots on your thoughts and how you can plant corn or nightshade, a deadly poison, and you can have both grow. Our minds are the most powerful entity on this earth. Like when you look around, and this is something that I don't think people understand, and why I wanted to tell them through the books, not just my opinion, but through the books. When we look around, look at what we're doing right now. You and I are probably hundreds of miles apart, if not more. Right. We have this little thing called a phone, and we're looking at each other. There are people that are watching us have a conversation. Somebody thought of this. Like you can think of things too. And these books have really helped me change my self-belief and my limiting beliefs. They've helped me raise my consciousness, my awareness. These are the things that books have done for me, and they can do the same for you, but you've got to read them. If you're not going to read them, then you should tap into me and these other folks who have already read them, and we're going to give you the game. So going back to the book that you were talking about, I don't remember the name, but it was African, something to do with African. And I saw the video you posted earlier. Can you say that one more time? So
the falsification of African consciousness.
Falsification of African consciousness. So when you're giving your book, I would call it a mini review, if nothing else. I know what that book contains, if nothing else, at a macro level. Like I understand conceptually. So if I want to know more because it resonates with me, now I'm aware. And the first step in solving any problem is awareness. The first step in creating any change is awareness. So you're giving value by telling me that. I didn't know this book existed before you said it. And my intention is to make sure people know that there are all of these books. You've named a ton already within the time we've been on here. And on my social media, I've got dozens, I'm sure at this point. People need to know that these books can change their lives. And since I know that they're not, like, statistically speaking, they're not likely reading them, then I'll just give them the information and hopefully they change that in the future. That's how my journey got started, what I'm doing now.
I got you. Yeah, you're doing a great job. I always check out your page. You take, other people saying that they're reading, and you're throwing your enthusiasm onto that, so you're showing everybody that is reading, you're just showing they're not alone. You know what I mean? That, hey, there's a community here and we will accept you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And real quick on that point, I had posted one of my best Instagram reels was a remix with Big Sean, who was talking about a couple of books that changed his life. I just so happened to have them on my bookshelf. So I pulled one out and I just sat there and was perusing while the camera was going, but he was in an interview talking about how these books have literally they are a part of why he is who he is now. So that does a couple of things for me. One, he's not joking. I have this book and here it is. That's the first thing. Two, it's Big Sean. This dude is a rapper from Detroit. You wouldn't expect this rapper from Detroit to be an avid reader, but he is. Another stereotype broken. And then three, the way that the interview was set up, he was like almost in tears. So because of what these books have done for him and how they changed his life. So I felt like that those types of things are part of it too. These entertainers that have written books. Rick Ross has a book that I thought was great. Perfect Day to Boss Up. I thought that was a good book. Russ has a book. There are rappers who read, they just don't talk about it. And while we may not want the kids to gravitate towards entertainers, we may not want them to idolize the ball players and the movie stars and all of that. We may not want them to, but in a lot of cases, the kids that need help, that's what they gravitate to because that's who they identify with. So if we want the kids to read, or we want their parents to read, we've got to bring the interesting things to them, what interests them, not Jonathan, because I may not be interested in the same thing. But if a kid is interested in 21 Savage or Lil Baby, then you got to take, what does that look like? What does it look like to write a book about Lil Baby? What does it look like to have him on camera talking about reading? Because I think at least some of these guys are much smarter than what people take them for. They just don't speak on it. So I I really believe that there's something in, and I'm keep going back to what you said earlier, just that balance between genius and being cool, nerd and being cool. And I feel like that's really the next phase, is just connecting those dots and having people know that they're smart too. They just don't really talk about it.
Exactly. It's funny you mentioned Lil Baby. I remember another interview he did, and I think it was Charlemagne.
Mm.
And Charlemagne's like, so, you did time in prison, so are you a reader? He's like, I was an avid reader before I went to prison. I just like to read. You know what I mean? He's like, I enjoy reading. And, when you talk to kids and they're interested in Lil Baby. It's okay. Okay, cool. And as a teacher, it's our responsibility to find that connection point. It's like, okay, cool. I am too. Did you know he likes to read?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it's just that little spark. They go, for real?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, sure.
Yep.
And then it's like you said, showing them a book that, hey, Rick Ross, this rapper you love, he wrote this book. These people who we look at, instead of wasting time telling these kids who to look up to, use who they look up to make that connection. Once you make that connection, everything, like you said, everything just grows from there.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to be so. I think that's what some of our generation kind of hangs up on, is we're demanding that they follow somebody else, and then it becomes a conflict, right? It becomes, like you said, meet me at the crossroads.
Mm-hmm.
Let's use what you do now. Let's not use it for a conflict. Let's just use it to grow to where we're trying to go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, you spoke about books that changed Big Sean's life. That kind of segues to my next question. What was the last book that you read that you can say, this book changed my life?
Oh, excuse me. Feeling is the Secret by a pen name is Neville. It'd be Neville Goddard. And the reason why I feel like that was so impactful, like I'm on this journey, man, and it is admittedly a very lonely journey at times, because I am the only person really in my closest circle that's doing this. There's a couple other guys that are on the social entrepreneurship journey, but in my family, immediate family, extended family, I'm the black sheep, as they would say. So it is difficult to keep going at times when no one around you seems like they're interested in pushing the culture forward and this mission forward. So this book talks about how going back to mindset, going back into not manifesting, but really understanding the power of your mind, but being out of just the logical element. So the feeling, as men, we have more masculine energy than feminine energy. Feminine energy
Right.
is going to be the intuitive energy that women tend to have much more than men. And the explorer, the imagination, all of those, letting your mind go and all of that. So this book really helped me tap into that inner energy to say, trust your intuition. You feel it, believe it, it is. So I would say that's probably the last book that I read. This isn't a question, but I will answer my own question that I'll ask myself, which is the most impactful book that I've read in the last few years, which is The Alchemist, or not even the last few years. This is a book that I've read once a year for the last 8 years. The Alchemist is my favorite book of all time, because I believe that we are all Santiago. Have you read The Alchemist? Okay.
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you already know we are Santiago, and I feel like I am Santiago. I know where the treasure is. I'm on my way back from the pyramids. I thought it was down in Georgia when I was there. Nah, it's not there. I'm back in Kentucky, and I'm getting there, and I'm in the process of digging. And each time that I've read it, I've seen myself at a different stage of the journey. And even in Will Smith's book, he talks about The Alchemist being his first literary love affair, and I feel the same. This is back when I first moved from Cali to Kentucky in 2014. My friend gave me the book, and immediately I was like, okay, this is what I'm about to go through. And sure enough,
Right.
I've been through it, all of it, man, from having everything I thought I wanted to losing it all, to getting it back, to figuring out what am I doing with life and my purpose and all of that. So most of the books that have been impactful in that way have been mindset, because I grew up in a very studious home. The book is titled The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Thank you.
Yeah. If I had
Um,
it around here, I'd hold it up, but I don't have it in front of
and I'm out of town, and it's not one of the books that I got in my backpack, so unfortunately I don't have it. But it's The Alchemist. You'll definitely see it if you take a quick Google search.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do believe that we are Santiago, and we're all on this journey. If should you choose to pursue it, and that's what I feel now, man. These books have really been impactful in just changing my mindset. I came from corporate, I came out of finance. So the idea in my field, in my former field, using your imagination is how you end up in jail. So I wasn't using my imagination. It was straight
Yeah.
numbers. It's very logical. It's very reasonable. And in this entrepreneurship game and what I'm doing now, you've got to throw a lot of that out of the way and trust your inner being, your inner higher self. And these are things I had no idea about until 2020, when I really started reading the other mindset books. But The Alchemist was something that really left its imprint on me. I'll ask you, man, what about you? Was the last book that you read, and the most impactful book that you've read?
Okay, I'll say the first impactful book that I read, I was in the 10th grade, and I read a book called Monster by Monster Cody. Now, what happened is, I remember my brother read it when I was probably in the 7th or 8th grade. He read it, he loved it, he spoke highly of it. I didn't pick it up at that time. And the time that I read it, I thought I was a tough guy, right? I was just, I don't want to say I was bad, but I was experiencing things that I had no business, right? And I remember, my mom tried to give me a mentor. I didn't respect the mentor, so I didn't listen to him, right? So he's like, hey, you're playing basketball, you have these things going for you, you need to stop doing the other stuff that you're doing. I'm like, well, you're just scared. So I'm not listening to you because you're soft, right? I broke everything into soft and tough. Yeah. That's the only way I saw other black men. And it's the only way I saw myself, right? And I was like, I got to be tough. For some reason or another, I have to be tough. So I was just kind of hell-bent on doing that. That was where my mind was. And I read Monster, and this was the first time I heard somebody who had been through everything. And it was telling me this isn't the way to go, right? So he was somebody who had done everything. So he's not speaking from a place of fear. He's speaking from a place of experience, which is a big difference. Yeah. So he demanded that respect of somebody who has experienced everything. And then he said, okay, look. So in the book, the way he structured it really brought me in, because he told the wild stories first, right? So let me show you how I did this and how I gained my respect and how I did this. So that drew me in, like, oh, this guy's tough. So now I'll listen to him. Then on about chapter 4, he just switched. He's like, now let me tell you how everything you just read was dumb. And you might have thought it was cool, and you might have thought it was tough. Let me tell you how dumb it was. And so then I kept reading. And then it was the first time that I just heard somebody who had walked on this path say that this path is stupid. And I'm telling you from somebody who's done it and has done it more than you and is not afraid of you and is telling you that it's stupid. You know what I mean? And then, like, what really drew me in, I remember he talked about how the police came to him and told him, hey, some people who I know you have a problem with are over 2 streets over, and they're by themselves. And he spoke about how he's like, at this time, he was like 17, and he had already gained a level of respect where he was, right? He was in Los Angeles. And he's like, everyone in my gang knew who I was. Everybody in this area know who I was, know what I do. They know I'm not somebody to joke around with. So the police coming and telling me, hey, these people who you're looking for over here, they know what I'm going to go do, or at least what I'm going to go try to do, and I'm going to try to take their life. And you're the police. You're supposed to try to stop me. So he's like, why would you tell me to go take somebody's life? And that's when he had to understand on a bigger scale that they're pawns on a chessboard.
Yep.
Right. And he's like, that time I went over there, and sure enough, they were by themselves. He's like, I didn't do anything, because I'm like,
wow,
what am I here for? You know what I mean? Because at
yeah,
the time, we're just in a gang war. So wherever we see somebody, it happens at. And he says now he understands that he was being used as a dumb little pawn, not to say dumb, but
sure.
as a pawn in a bigger grand scheme of things. He's like, they just want me to exterminate another black man. You know what I mean? He's like, the only thing that's all they want me to do. He's like, and then he started to draw parallels between a gang war and a war, you know, a national war. You know what I mean? He starts to draw these parallels of PTSD, and he talks about how we are used in a grand scheme of things. He's like, we're used to bring property value down, and then they come and buy the property to kick us out.
Yeah.
He's like, we're representing this street corner that none of us own. All of our parents rent here. So why are we so willing to bleed and die for this street that none of us own any property on? You know what I mean? And that was the first book that really just changed my mindset to make me realize things were on a bigger scale, right? To make me understand that, hey, you know, we are so much smarter than we give ourselves credit for. You know what I mean? And so I read that book, and that really changed my outlook on things, and made me look at things from a bigger standpoint, not from a day-to-day standpoint, but bigger, just let's look at this thing from a grand scale. You know what I mean? And I was a military kid, so I understood how you know, propaganda works. You know what I mean? How war propaganda really works. You know what I mean? Like how we're brought up to be what we think is normal, but we're really just being hypnotized.
Yeah. And
that's what he talked about in the book. And then he was the first quote unquote tough guy that showed you he was intelligent. And so I was like, oh, okay, there's that intersectionality, right? There's that bridge. We don't have to just be soft and tough. We're so much more than that. So that book really affected me. And then a book by Bell Hooks called A Will to Change. That really affected me because, you know, as a black man, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I never knew what the word patriarchy meant, right? I hadn't heard it until I got on Twitter one day, and I'm already 23 years old.
Right.
And I'm, the hell is that? You know what I mean? And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, wow. Like, so the book Will to Change really just teaches you how we're tricked into believing that this is a way of life, right? That this inequality system is how things should be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And how he talks about it's just white male violence, right? And I was in my 30s. It was during the pandemic when I read it. And she drew this parallel that really affected me when she talked about how little boys from the age of about 4 were told to be a man, right? But then we're not given what that means. We're just told, usually when we're crying about something, we're told, toughen up, be a man. So now we're given this assignment, but without any kind of rules or parameters about what that means. So then she talks about how we go through life chasing this capitalistic dream that, hey, once we get a certain amount of money, we will be happy. Once we reach that, everything will be worth it. And she said in a midlife crisis, what happens is we realize we're not there. And we realize we're never going to get there to that magical tipping point. And then we start to look back at our life and we realize that we've chased a carrot. We've chased a ghost instead of just being happy. You know what I mean? And so that really affected me because I was in that mouse wheel, right? And she's like, we become 40 years old as black men and we've ignored our children. So there's a gap in our communication with our children. We've treated the ones closest to us, we pushed them away because we're going to work, right? All we know is go to work. That's it. miss children's parties because we're going to work. We miss doctor's appointments because we're going to work. And once we get this age and we realize that that work that we've sworn our whole life to doesn't love us, right? It's used our body to this point, and it will go on without us. Then we're looking around, we're by ourselves, and we're just bitter. You know what I mean?
Ooh.
And that really affected me because I was feeling some of that. I was feeling that, okay, once I get to this point, everything else will work out. Once I become here, once I get to this pay point, everything else will work out in my life. Then you get a little older and then the pandemic hits and you realize, damn, I pushed things away to chase this carrot that I've helped somebody else be more present, and I've taken my presence away from the people who I'm supposed to be serving. And so that will change really affected me that way, and just change how I look at, work and how I look at life. You know what I mean? From a parent or from a husband point of view, because it's like, what are we really doing?
Mm-hmm.
That book made me just really look into like, what am I really doing here? Like, my kids know I'm going to go to work. They know that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at that point, that's all they knew. Like, if they get sick, I'm going to go to work. If I come get them, I'm dropping them off, I'm going back to work. If they want to do this, okay, I'm going to work. I was working on vacation. And it's like,
yeah.
I read that and I'm like, damn. And it's probably kind of like how when you left corporate America, it's like, this doesn't serve the purpose that I had envisioned in my mind all my life.
Yep.
And it's like, well, what the hell? Why did I envision that? And then the will to change just told you, like, because you were lied to. You were told to do this, but you weren't given any instructions on how to do it. So you made up along the way. You know what I mean? We listen to rappers that tell us who to date.
Mm-hmm.
We listen to movie actors that tell us when to wake up, because we're not given instructions on how to do this thing, and we end up feeling inadequate, and we end up feeling depressed, and we hate ourselves because we've fucked up from the age of 4 to age 40.
Bro, oh my gosh, yes. As you're talking, I'm thinking we must have been brothers in a different life, man, because that's exactly what I went through. There's a book called The Second Mountain. The author's name slips me, but it's that story. It's exactly that. I finished my MBA at 22, and so I started working, going into P&G, and I thought that was it. You couldn't have told me that I wasn't going to retire. Multi-millionaire working for this company. Oh man, I've made it. I'm from Hazard. I grew up in the trailer park. I'm here.
Right.
And then you get to the top of that first mountain, then I love what you just said. You were lied to. And that's what I felt. It's like, oh, I get it now. I got all the things that y'all told me and you dangled in front of me, told me was winning, and you told me that this is life and this is what success looks like. And now I'm here. And y'all lied to me, because this is trash, bro. Like, I'm wasting my life, and this is no longer sufficient. So you got to walk back down that mountain, which is what I went through. And then you've got to find your other mountain to walk up, and you got to start pursuing that, which is where I'm at now, walking up the second mountain. And I think that so many of us, if you think about the collective power, everybody talks about the buying power of Black people, the 1.4 trillion, but that money's not going back to us because we're not walking up our real mountains. We're walking up the other mountains. And so we're not creating and doing the things out of love that we should be doing to serve one another and to serve our people and serve our kids. And so we give that money right back to the same oppressive system that we're trying to get out of anyway. And that part of this conversation, man, that's so deep, because I can look around. Earlier when I was talking about my family and my friends and being one of the only people that would even have a conversation. No one else is in a position to have a conversation with somebody about a passion that they have. The only things that they're thinking about are the day to day. And that's what it comes down to, man. We're not focused on the right things because we're unaware. We don't know. And I'm first generation college student. Like me, my siblings, we're all first generation, if I guess that'd be technically correct, but that was it. That's what we thought was going to be the way. You go to college, you get the job, you have the family, you do all the things, and then but then what? Then you work for these entities, and you spend all of this time, this effort, and this energy doing something that you don't love. And love is the strongest. If you want to create something, build something. David Brooks, yes, thank you. Yeah, so David Brooks is the author of The Second Mountain,
Yeah.
and it definitely describes it. But I personally feel like the pandemic, and you touched on it. The pandemic changed my life in so many ways, and I think it changed a lot of people's lives because it gave us the gift of time, and time to think, and time to consider what life is like not doing what we've done before. So this great resignation, I think, happened because people were like, yeah, I'm good. You start to see other ways of making a living. And I don't make the same money that I made when I was working in corporate. The money I was making was silly then, but I have tripled the impact, and my life is filled with gratitude and appreciation, because when I go into a school and the kids are waving and saying bookman, and you're the book guy, and we're reading today, and you see it, and it does something for the soul that money never did for me. And yeah, man, that's a deep conversation. And I hope that we start to have more of those conversations at a macro level as well, especially as Black people. I think it's important.
Yeah, like, man, I remember I was working for this company. I graduated college, I had one son at that time, and me and my wife, we moved to Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
So we're here from Southern Georgia. Now, Southern Georgia, there's really nothing in the city of Americus, right? So it's very easy to feel satisfied with $12 an hour job. There's nothing wrong with it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it's easy to just feel like, okay, I don't need to ascend to try to get anything more. So we moved to Alabama, and I get my first grown-up job. And this is kind of the beginning of the indoctrination. I get my first grown-up job as a salary. So when I'm sick, I still get paid. Wow, right? And I remember I worked 7:30 to 5:30 every day. And we're just sitting there. We're all in these little booths on these phones all day long. And the boss man, I'll never forget, I look up, and he comes into town from D.C. on Tuesday. He comes straight to the office from the airport. He changes clothes in the office. He works all day. He flies out Wednesday morning to go California or somewhere like that. And he's got 3 kids, right? And I remember him making a joke like, I should write my kids' names down.
Oh.
And I remember people laughing, and it really affected me, because I'm like, wow, this is success. And this is what they're telling me is only thing that I can ascend to, is never seeing my kid. Now, he's making a lot of money, because he's talking about buying a new house, and he's doing this and that and the third, but he's never seen his child. He's never seen his wife. He comes and flies in to the office, right? He changes in the office. You know what I mean? And then he works until 6:30, 7 o'clock. He goes home. He flies out the next morning. And I remember that really affected me, like, okay, then this is what I have to do now, because his kids got to be happy. I mean, he's making money, right? So I start to just dive into that. I'm just going to work, and I'm like, if I can just make it. And you're driving yourself not crazy, but you're driving yourself out of your true passion, right? Because you're working for somebody else's passion. And I started making a certain amount of money, but then the stress comes with it, right? The constant having to improve yourself comes with that. And as Black people, we think that means we're going up the ladder. We're moving up. And I'm coming home exhausted every day. Like, but I'm getting up and going back, because I'm like, we're getting somewhere into it. And then I had to really find my passion, which is what I love. Why I love the Black Book Club is because that's the impact, right? Like you said, having the real impact of you go into a school and somebody say, hey, that's the book guy, that's the book man, right? Somebody coming to you and asking you, suggest me a book.
Mm-hmm.
And then you realize you're really having an impact on that person's life,
Yeah.
because you can suggest them a book that can change their entire outcome, right? When you're giving these kids these books and you're making a music video at the school, you're putting books in the front of their mind. And there's no paycheck that can affect you on a level like that, because you're showing these kids something that could change their tomorrow and their next month and their next year. And that is where the passion and the impact comes in at. You know what I mean? And like you said with the Second Mountain, where it's the lonely track down that mountain once you find out you've been lied to.
Yeah.
You got to go back and you're looking at all the points that you were lied to at, and you just want to cuss people out. You know what I mean?
That's a fact, bro, for sure.
How the hell can you lie to me? And you're just going down this mountain and you're just walking down and you're just trying to figure out where you begins and where the mountain ends.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that book, The Falsification of African Consciousness. It talks about how there's an experiment with a mouse, and they take a mouse from the wild and they put it into this box. And in order for the mouse to eat, it has to push a certain lever, right? Push the lever, food comes down, eats, drinks right there. It takes about 3 or 4 days for the mouse to understand, I push this lever, food comes down. And the book talks about how that block in their food creates their personality, right? Because they have to hit this button to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So you have made that their personality, when in the wild they didn't have to do that. And he draws this comparison to how black people in capitalism, where he basically says we don't know if we have what our true personality is because we've had to survive for so long. So we don't know what our true calling is because we've been in survival mode for so long.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, do we have a personality as a people? Working hard is not a personality. Like, I mean, you know, going to an office is not a personality. Your job is not a personality. But if you ask a lot of black people, well, who are you? The first thing they will say is their job,
Mm-hmm.
their job title. Like, okay, well, tell me who you are. Tell me about yourself. Well, I'm a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Or I do this. And that's the first, because that's our personality, because we have been, we're hitting this lever to get food.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to work to get food. So that is our personality, because we know we have to survive. And like you said, I think our generation now, we're in this kind of heightened survival mode where the pandemic hits and you see the great resignation, because now we're starting to see different consciousness where, okay, this job does not care about me. It does not fulfill my life like I thought it would. Let me try to find other things to do. And we can really take advantage of this time right now, that we can show our children and the youth that to not let your job define who
Mm-hmm.
you are. We all got to make money, but don't let it make you who you are. Be able to say who you are without your job title being the first thing you say.
It's deep, man. It really is. Especially the part with how we identify. Like that really is it. And it comes from when we were kids. At least I'll say for me, in my example, and some of the friends that I know, when you are supposed to be the ones that go and do the things that your parents couldn't do, then there's a lot of pressure on you to be that doctor. So when someone asks you, yes, I did it. I became the doctor. That's what I am. That's who I am. And it's dangerous, man, because you get too wrapped up in it, and that the midlife crisis comes in, and some people may not even know how to deal. Because I can imagine, I'm very fortunate. When I went back to work, I was able to get everything that I lost plus some, everything that I invested, everything I put in on my first go round. But I can imagine feeling so stuck at 45 years old, if somebody's at that age and you've got the house, you've got 3 kids, you've got the cars, you've bought into that lifestyle, and you cannot escape because your finances dictate everything that you do. I'm fortunate. I don't have any kids. I'm not married. So I knew when I went back to work that I was going to be leaving after 4 years at the most. So I went in with a plan. I knew I'm saving and investing money from day one as soon as I get it. But that freedom is something that we don't have, and we're still enslaved by a different system that was still created by the oppressors. So it's a very interesting dynamic. I think there's a lot of unhappy people, and I think the pandemic showed that. Some people were able to pivot, some people were able to get out, some people are still stuck in it now. And I feel for those people, man. Like, I really do, because I can only imagine seeing your life a different way, but not being able to get to it, and what that does to your psyche. But I think that's another conversation we've got to have is purpose. And that's why a lot of the books that I talk about, Seven Spiritual Laws of Success, purpose book. A lot of the other books that I read at the beginning of the pandemic were purpose book. Even the content I was listening to, podcasts, any YouTube teachings and such, it was all, how did these people get to do what they love? How did they do it? What makes them them? I don't believe that they're special in terms of we're all humans, and we're all special because we're all one of 8 billion, which is special in itself. But these folks have figured out how to become the highest version of themselves. How do they do that? And studying it and then being able to implement it is something I wish more people were able to do during that time. And one last thing on the pandemic, kind of related, but not necessarily along the same track. I remember there being a post, I'm pretty sure it went viral. There was a lady saying, hey, if you're being lazy during this pandemic, if you're not doing anything, that's good. That's okay. And I'm thinking, no, bruh, like, you understand the gift of time that you've been given. You don't have to spend time on the road. You can wake up in the morning, work on what you want to work on, do your job, and then get back to it. There are a lot of different ways you can utilize this time, but unfortunately, not everyone was able to do that. But I do think this is a conversation that we have to have at a larger scale of just finding our purpose. And it doesn't mean you've got to leave your corporate job or leave your attorney job, but it does mean that you've got to find something that speaks to your soul and gives you life beyond the things that we can feel, taste, touch, and all of that with our senses. There's something that's greater than that. And Black people, we come from the beginning, and we are in tune with, like, the universe. We're in tune with God. We're in tune with the energy and the ancestors. But they have done such a good job of negating that. You talked about propaganda earlier. That's a big part of it too. They own, if you own all of the media, then you can make a story into whatever. If somebody wanted to paint me out to be the worst human being on the planet, you may not believe it. My friends and family may not believe it, but everybody else that doesn't know me personally, oh yeah, that guy's trash. And that's how powerful it is. So we got to understand the systems that are working against us, the systems that exist, and the power. We got to give it credit where the credit is due, because it's extremely powerful what they can do. We have to create the counter systems to balance that. I lied to you, bro. It just hit me. I'm so sorry. The Spook Who Sat by the Door was the most powerful book. That was it.
Yeah.
My mentor gave me that book when I was 20 years old, before I got into corporate. And I had no idea why this dude was telling me to read this book until I got into corporate. And then I realized, oh, I know what I'm supposed to do. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm the Spook. I went into this corporate game. I learned it. I know what they're doing. We've talked about it in detail. But even beyond that, like, I get what they're doing, and I know how we can use that to our advantage. It just hit me. So I wanted to make sure that I said that. Yeah, Spook Who Sat by the Door. Shout out to Sam Greenlee, man. Like, that was a very, very impactful book for me.
Yeah, that's an amazing book. Shout out to Nipsey for naming the book, shouting the book out on the album,
yep,
and in the interview, which I think helped for the sales of it for the newer generation to go up. And I think a lot of times, and I'll kind of tell a story about my wife. So she's an artist, right? She's a painter, drawer. She's an amazing artist. And I remember her telling me when she was younger that she told her and she told people around her she wanted to be an artist. And first thing some of them said was, well, that doesn't make any money. And I think what happens is, because generationally we're not that far from slavery, right? No matter how people try to paint it, we're not that
far off.
Right.
So what happens is we're the children of, you know, it was looked at as the life goal to get into corporate
Yep.
America, right?
Yep.
We're the children from, what's the law that they put in place that they claim was to make blacks get hired more? I just can't think of the name of it.
Action.
Affirmative action.
Yeah.
Right. So we're the children of affirmative action. Our parents were told that this is going to save your life. Affirmative action. We're going to put you in an office. So then they felt the sense of gratitude for being in the office. And we weren't privy before to the microaggressions of being in corporate America, to the outright racism of being in corporate America and the effects of it, right? So we remember our fathers, our mothers coming home upset because they're having to deal with this aggressive behavior in an office. And then we see the effects that it has, right? Some of us have seen our fathers dive into alcoholism because they go to work and they're treated as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And they're told to be grateful for, right? Because, hey, we're giving you this paycheck that's a little bit more than you expected, but we're going to act like we're giving you the world. And so now we can see the good and the bad, right? We can see the dichotomy from it. So now we're making decisions of, okay, do I want to continue perpetuating this cycle of the effects of corporate America on my family? Do I want to keep making them? And we don't have to, like you said, we don't have to leave corporate America, but we have to put it in a space.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be able to build something on the outside that can give us purpose so that we can continue to deal with what we have to deal with in corporate America if we decide to keep dealing with it. You know what I mean? And from her being an artist and creating from outside of her job, that is revolutionary because we've been told to kill that part of our brain,
Mm-hmm.
right? To quell that, to just follow direction. Don't think outside the box. In school, we're taught how to be a great employee, right? We're taught how to listen and shut the hell up, right? So by her putting ink to a canvas is breaking so many generational cycles that were given and by you creating I Love Books is breaking so much and it's so powerful because we're told not to do that. We're told that you're lucky to even be in the door, right? At Procter & Gamble, when you walked in there, you're told in so many words, you're lucky we let your ass in it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
You better be happy. I mean, when I was working in my job, my first quote unquote grown up job, it was you're lucky that your black ass is in it.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have to say it. You look around and you can feel it. Because you're the only one there. Right? You're the only one that looks like you there. So you better act right. Right?
Yeah.
So then we're given the statistics. Hey, this amount of people, of black men are in jail. So you're lucky you're not in jail.
Mm-hmm.
You're lucky your black ass is getting a paycheck. You're lucky we let you into school. And they keep saying because of affirmative action. So you have to be grateful. So now you're being grateful to something and killing yourself in the process. But you're told to be grateful.
Yeah.
Because
and if you're not, then yeah, I mean, bro, that's it. You're told to be grateful for something that is killing you in different ways, like even if it's just taking your soul, like the feeling of community away, feeling of purpose away, and you're told to be happy. Like they're told to shut up and dribble. It's the equivalent for us. Like that's the corporate equivalent is the way that I think about it. You should be happy that we allowed you to be here and that you're not one of them. We're giving you this money and all of that stuff. It's a very interesting scenario, man. On so many different levels. Because I definitely felt that. And then the other side of that is black guilt. That's what I dealt with, because you're the one that made it and you're the one that's out getting the money. And now that leads to a different set of mental trauma, or to me, at least, I experienced that of feeling like I'm supposed to give everything that I have back to everybody because they didn't make it. Now you're dealing with another, that's something that my friends who are not Black or not of color, they don't deal with that, man. Like, their parents have already set them up. Their parents already have, so they don't need to take care of their parents. I met the wealthiest guy that I know. I met him my freshman year in college, and it's still the same thing. Like, his father is hella wealthy, and you know, he's doing his thing through that platform, through that avenue. But for me, you know, I've worked extremely hard to get to where I am, and I still not catching up. And he doesn't have to think about, well, my mom needs something or my dad needs something. He gets to think about, what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do with this bread? What am I going to do with da da da? And I've got to think, man, you know, my brother may not make as much money. I got to make sure that his daughter is good when it's my time. Or let me send her. He may not be able to afford to send her on senior trips, so let me step in and give this. And my mom may not be able to afford this. Like, that's a different conversation that we've got to deal with as well, because I've 100% went through that, and that's not a good feeling either, man. So we Black people, when I think about the things that we have to deal with in the current state of affairs for our people, man, it's heavy. Like, it's really heavy, because we can see, I think it was Erykah Badu that talked about the 5% of people that observe, that are not the followers, not the leaders. Then there's the 5%, which is where I would consider us being. We can observe this thing and how it's happening. And when you see it and you start to think, this is happening, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to solve this problem, because there's so many layers that if you get to one layer, that's good. But then you got to deal with the other layer. You got to deal with those two layers, great. But then you got to deal with, and I don't know that that's the same for anybody. People will say, well, what about immigrants? Immigrants didn't come here and get slaughtered like we did. They weren't, it was the different level of intentionality with us and being in the same country that enslaved us and did all of these things. And you and I know the history, but our counterparts don't know. So when we go to have a conversation, we can't even get the empathy and compassion for it, because the Eurocentric, going back to the book you talked about, the Eurocentric teaching doesn't teach that part. So it's not, in some cases it's ignorance and willful ignorance, true, but in some cases it's purely just they don't have to show it. They don't have to. You own the textbook companies, you own the media companies, you own every type of way other than word of mouth that someone can communicate. You own it, so you get to control it. And when you realize that and the extent of what's happened, it is insane. And I consider myself professional problem solvers. That's what these companies have taught me to do. And I looking at it from just a purely, here's the problem, here's this look. I don't know, man. It's a lot. So it's heavy, man. So I would say, again, I commend you for putting in work and driving these conversations. We need many more, and your expertise is needed. Your passion is needed. And it's a lot of work to do, man.
It is. And like, you know, from like just a social media aspect of it, right? Like, because like you said, we deal with so much on a day-to-day basis that we're able to, like, you build those communities from a social media aspect, you know, and we deal with so much in just microaggressions. Like, we go to work and we turn our music down, or we go to work and, you know, if somebody says, hey, what'd you watch on TV yesterday? We can't really go in. We can't say, oh, I watched this, you know, James Baldwin debate, or we can't do it because then we're afraid that we're going to start another conversation that we don't want to have at work. We just don't want to do it. So then we say, oh, you know, whatever. I watched the Bucks game and we're killing a part of ourselves for our greater comfort. But then we're able to pull our phone out and we're able to look on Chief Bookman's page and see, he's reading that shit right there. Okay, cool. And we're able to get that moment of community, right? That moment of that feeling of freedom, just for that moment. That, okay, he reading that shit. I can talk to him about reading that shit. Okay, cool. I can comment on it, and then people comment, yeah, I'm reading it too. And then that gives us that breath. that while we're in the bathroom or we're on lunch or we're doing whatever, we get that one breath, and then we can go back and we can have to deal with that shit,
Yeah.
right? And then we can go get in the car and go back and see. Everybody's commenting on what I said. Okay, cool. Other people are dealing with this too. So we can use these social media sites and these platforms. We can use it so in such a powerful way. You know what I mean? That we can create those bonds that we all need so that we can just deal with this shit, right? Because none of us have the answer. So we're all just trying to figure it out. And while we're trying to figure it out, we can bounce these ideas off of each other. We can say, hey, did you read this book? See how they talk about doing this? Okay, cool. I started doing that some as well, and it works. And we can, somewhere a solution can be found, right? Yeah. I don't think I'm not going to be able to find it, but I can show you a book. I remember Tupac said, like, I can spark the mind of the person who's going to change the world.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't have the answer, but I can say something that can point you in the direction that you take that, you read this, and you find this person. He read that, she read that. You two can come up with a solution. And hey, as long as if I put some spark in that line, then I did my job. You know what I mean? And then we go on. Like, my brother put that monster book that sparked my mind 2 years before I read it. Then I read it. Okay, that changed everything since then. I can go to another kid. I can say, hey, look, I know the shit you're doing.
Yeah.
I know it because I did it. So I can read this book. I'm like, I want to read the book and then come talk to me. I'm not talking to you from a place of fear. I'm talking to a place of experience. And then you can read that book. You can take what you want to take from it. You find somebody else in your circumference. You can show them that book. Then he takes that, he goes, and it goes all the way down the line. And that's why, you know, I love like pre-owned books because I love seeing what was highlighted. Yeah. You know, my wife's uncle had this huge library. And I remember every time we went over his house the day before Thanksgiving, I would sneak over into his library. I would just look at all the books. And then I didn't know he noticed it, right? Because he'd be upstairs eating. I'd sneak down. I'm just looking at it. I'm trying to see what kind of books I want to read. I never took any books from his library. I would take pictures and I'd end up buying them. And I don't even think I spoke to him about books really that much. And I remember he passed away, and he told my wife, I guess he told his wife, and she told my wife, hey, tell Tyree to go to my library, and any books that he wants to take, he can take. And that tripped me out. I'm like, how the hell? But he knew, he saw, you know, that I'm going and looking at him. And then I read a book that he read, and he's highlighting places, and he's underlining. And just to be able to read what's important to him, and he was such an ingenious person to me, and so I can read what somebody that I look to thought was important, right? And then I can take that and say, okay, wow, and then I can show somebody else. So I always say, you know, pre-owned books are okay with me because you can see what somebody else, you know, James Baldwin books, people write full dissertations in right. James Baldwin, Toni Morrison book. You can see, I bought a Toni Morrison book on the, I think it was The Bluest Eye. And on the inside cover, the person had a full report written down about what they took from the book, what it meant to them. And I mean full in detail. And then on the back, it was continued. This is what I thought. This is what I thought. And so you really see the impact that a book can have on somebody, because for you to read a book and then write a whole report, this is not for class because you're not turning this in. They just wrote it because it was on their mind. And so we can really change things with these books. That's why I stopped. I have no problem with anybody reading Kindle. I love Kindle. Kindle is much more efficient than the way that I do it. Much more. Because you can carry 10 books in one Kindle. The only reason I don't read Kindle is because I got 2 boys. And I need them to see me pick a book up. If they see me on a phone, they think I'm playing on my phone. I need them to see me with a book in my hand. Then they sit down, they're reading a book.
Yeah.
Because now if they just see me playing on my phone, they're gonna play on their phone. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, but I salute any medium of books. I salute comics. I salute any graphic novel, any fantasy book, any sci-fi, any black futuristic book, any genre you can pull something from. I hate people that say, and I used to be one of them. I only read autobiography. You can learn from any piece of literature, any. I promise you. Like, you are pigeonholing yourself by saying you only read autobiography.
Yeah.
What is your favorite genre?
Funny enough, biographies of sort. Really, I mean, I'd say, I don't even know that I would say it's a genre as much as it's a type, which is self-awareness, self-development, things that help me improve as a human being. Those are my favorite. That's what I gravitate towards. They tend to be in bios, but they're also in books like The Alchemist or The Four Agreements, Seven Spiritual Laws of Success. Any of those books, just because I'm on this journey of becoming the best version of myself. And this is not something I would have ever thought of years ago, but that's where I'm at now. Is any book that is helping me become better. And that could be through internal work. It could be through mindset shifts, really any type of context that is making my life better. So I don't read as much fiction as I should. I'm going to change that here in the future. I'm going to read more fiction because I think you can get a lot of ideas from fiction literature. But that's historically what I've read. What about you?
Well, okay, let me ask you one more follow-up question, then I'll answer you. So I had a conversation with somebody recently about self-help books, right? So I want to get your point of view on it. Do you have an issue, a difficulty, pulling vital information from self-help books that are written by authors that are not Black?
No. I don't, personally, but again, I grew up around mostly white people, and I live in Kentucky, so I'm around mostly white people. I don't focus on the author as much as I focus on the content. When I read from my vantage point. If it's not applicable to me, I chuck it like anything else. But a lot of the things are just, it's information that I was unaware of. If there are more Black authors, now I haven't seen as many Black authors in the self-help, self-development space, and I think there's a gap there, or I'm ignorant and I don't know that they exist and I need to educate myself to find them. But through my searches, the same with women, I haven't seen as many women or Black women in particular in that space either. So I'm looking for something, and I feel like there's a gap. But again, I acknowledge that could just be because I haven't seen it. If you have recommendations or anyone else has recommendations, I would love to read more Black authors that talk about developing self and consciousness and all of that. Less about consciousness. I think there's a lot of us on that, but in terms of true self-development, self-help, self-development, haven't seen as many.
Yeah. And that's something that I had to really kind of look into, because for a long time I would swear off any self-help book that wasn't written by a Black author, right? I would say, well, if it wasn't written by a Black author, then they're speaking from a place of privilege that I cannot connect with, right? And I remember I spoke to another guy that was in this literary space, and I think he recommended the book called First Three Words, or 3 words, something like Magic 3 Words, something. And it speaks about 3 magic words. It speaks about mind shift, right? It speaks about how if you say you can't do something, everything in the world works to make yourself right.
Yep.
Right? If you say, hey, I won't be able to do this, you're making it happen, right? You're mentally making it a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I read the book and I still had this block up, right? I still had this internal block. I'm like, well, this is BS. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I can't relate to it. I remember my wife being like, well, why can't you? And I was like, because I mean, he's talking like if you just say something, it's going to happen. And he's speaking to that because he's a white man in America. So anything he says, he does not have a limitation on it because that's his reality.
Yeah.
But in my reality, it's different. And she's like, well, there's some of that, you know what I mean? But she's like, you're doing a disservice to your community if you are refusing one source of knowledge that can be beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And we're kind of like a bridge, right? Where
Yeah.
we can show our community these great books that we had the privilege of reading and being knowledgeable about. And she's like, for you to cut that off would be a disservice. And I remember like, I can kind of understand where you're coming from. Now I have a preference, of course, of, you know, black authors. I'm like, if I can read a book like The $100 Startup,
Mm-hmm.
right? I got it right in front of me. If I can read this book and I can use some of the processes from this book to help the Black Book Club
Mm-hmm.
that serves my community, I'm cutting myself off if I refuse to read it because it's written by somebody that doesn't look like me. You know what I mean? And so this year is when I started doing. That's why I wanted to ask you that before I segue into my favorite genres. I'm still an biography guy,
Mm-hmm.
right? If I can read an autobiography, I'm going to do it. And my 7-year-old always, because when I read a book, I always say, hey, what book should I read next? My 7-year-old, he will always say, well, you said you were going to read more fiction.
Mm-hmm.
He always says it, right?
Yeah.
He's like,
Yeah.
you read those boring history books all the time, Dad. You need to read. And he's right? So this year, I tried to make it a point where I'm going to read more self-help and fiction books and lighter fiction books, right? I would read like The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. Is an amazing book, amazing fiction book, but it is so heavy, right? It's such a heavy read that when you read it, you will go through the emotions and you'll get pissed off and you'll get sad. And I need to read more kind of lighthearted. I want to read Afro-futuristic books. Is a book that I want to get into. And you know, self-help books, I love them. Jason Wilson, Battle Cry is an amazing book.
Yeah.
It's an amazing book. I know I want to read another Amos Wilson book, Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat. The psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat towards reclamation of the African mind. He just talks about how we can internalize a lot of things to make us hate ourselves.
Yeah.
If the major corporations tell you to hate yourself, you'll do it, right? And they do that so they can benefit from it. So if you have a sense of self-hatred, you will excuse things like horizontal violence, right? You will excuse things like the destruction of community. You know what I mean? You'll understand things like, okay, I'm gonna get some money and get the hell away from these people. And so you'll start to think success is being surrounded by people that don't look like you.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you'll get that house across the street, and when another black person moves in, you feel a sense of what the hell, instead of a sense of yes. You know what I mean? You'll get like, why the hell are they here? I'm supposed to be a black person in this neighborhood. So he talks about that. Another self-help book is You Owe You, is what I want to read, which is by Eric Thomas.
It's in my car right now. Yep. I'm about 3 chapters.
Eric Thomas, he's amazing. Like, Eric Thomas got me through a hatred of my job. And another, I know you said for suggestions, is a book called The 12 Universal Laws of Success, which is written by my man, Dr. Herbert Harris.
Got it on the shelf, my brother. I love that book. Yep.
This book is amazing. I remember reading, I went to a bookstore, a black bookstore in Nashville. And I remember talking, I very rarely talk to people I don't know, right? Well, I have surface level conversations with them. My wife says I talk too much. I have a surface level conversation. I'll just go on about my business. And we went to a black owned bookstore, and my wife's talking to the owner. And she's like, yeah, my husband wants to do a black owned bookstore. And, we're in Huntsville, Alabama. And, he's trying to get it off the ground. And I spoke to him, and he's like, hey, I'll tell you what. Whatever books you buy, go ahead and buy. You're paying full price for them. I always respect him because he's about his business, right? He's like, whatever you buy, you buy. He's like, but I'll give you this, right? He's like, I'll give you this, and just do me a favor, read this one first. And I was like, all right, I guess. He's like, on me, just read it first, and come talk to me after you read it. And I read it, and I remember I hated the book, The 48 Laws of Power, right? I despised it. Because to me, it was kind of and I need to read it again, but I think it was from a place of using people in a sense. So I didn't like it. And then this book is kind of the opposite of that, where he speaks about just the self-work that you can do so you can deserve success, right? Instead of using people to get success, this focuses on what you can do to deserve it. I suggest this book to any person that is in any walk of life, really, because he hits on every concept. You know what I mean? The law of thought, law of change, law of vision, law of command, the law of magnetism, the law of focus, the law of action, the law of value, the law of relationships, law of supply, persistence, and truth. You know what I mean? So he's going to hit everything. And if you're trying to own a business, if you're not trying to own a business, you're just trying to make impact in your community. You're just trying to go day to day. All of these are successes. So he speaks to them in a respectful way that he shows you how you can go out and get it. You know what I mean? How you can create life that you want to live. So those are those are my favorite genres. I remember I read Hurricane Carter's autobiography, The 12th Round. Amazing. I know we all I've seen Hurricane Carter, the movie with Denzel, but the book, he goes into more detail in the book that makes you look at the movie a little bit different. Just time constraint kept him from doing some things, but they could not have shown him in a true light of himself in that movie. I'll say that. He was a lot more revolutionary than before he went to jail. You know what I mean? Then the movie kind of lets on. And so that's an amazing autobiography. So here's the book, 3 Magic Words by U.S. Anderson. That's
okay.
Yeah, it's a great book. I mean, I was in my if it ain't this, I ain't touching it.
Right.
I was in that aspect big time when I read it. So I was not. And that was a conflict on my part. You know what I mean? A contradiction on my part where I was not as receptive to the information that I should have been.
Understood, man. First, again, thank you, bro. This has been such a great conversation, and I'm beyond thankful, man. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that we're able to connect sooner than later. Is there anything, I got to head out here and head back to Kentucky. I'm actually in Indiana right now, so I'm about to leave the spot. But
shout out to Indiana.
Indiana in the building. Is there anything I can do to help or support you before I let you go today?
Just keep doing what you're doing. You know what I mean? I pull so much inspiration from what you're doing. Even just talking to school districts and talking about curriculums, hearing you say you're doing that's something that I wanted to do, that I had built up a block in my mind. Ain't nobody gonna listen to me. But being able just to hear you saying that this is what you're doing, you know what I mean? You're stepping into these arenas and you're bringing yourself, you know what I mean? You're not trying to be anybody else. You're showing who you are. Like you said, you're in the hoodie and you're working with these different school districts to create a better environment for the children. Is something that I took a lot of inspiration from you saying today, and from you saying you've giving 15,000 books out. I'm like, damn, I need to step it up. I need to get on it. So just keep doing what you're doing, man. I appreciate it. I'm watching. I know a lot of other people are watching. When I put the post up that said I was going to be talking to you today, I had people, man, that's my guy right there, man. I've been following him since this, that, and the third.
Man.
So, like, a lot of people are watching what you're doing, my man. Please keep doing it, and we're going to stay in conversation. And I know when the book comes out, I want you to come back on and talk to us about, creating the children's book so we can keep this conversation going.
100%. Absolutely, man. And if anything changes and I can do anything to support you, say the word. Hit me up and let me know. I'm really about this life. I've made a decision, the power of a decision. I've made a decision that this is what I want with my life. It's what I'm going to do. And I'm committed until it's time for me to transition and be with the ancestors. Until then, this is my calling for life. So thank you again, my brother. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep inspiring. Watching you as well, and taking the inspiration from you. Like Nip said, highest human act is to inspire, bro. Like, we're out here, and we are. You said it earlier. We are the bridge. We are the light. We are who we are. And I think we as Black men in particular have to, I think it was Charlamagne, somebody said that we needed a bigger ego. I don't remember who that was, but they talked about, like, sometimes we don't even have as much of an ego, and not in a negative way, not in a self-centered, arrogant way, but in a, yes, I'm going to walk into this Department of Education and I'm going to give y'all what I think. You may not like it, but I'm going to do what I feel is the right thing. And I'm confident in myself and all of those things. And so, yeah, man, we are it. And I'm grateful for you. You're leading the way, not just with the people, but with your family. That's where it all starts. So keep doing what you're doing, man. Keep working, my brother. Let's change the world book by book, man.
Hey, we going to do it. We locked in. I appreciate you, my man.
Salute to you, my brother. Take care.
All right.
Have a great day and great week.
I appreciate it. I'll talk to you.
Peace, peace.
All right. All right. I really appreciate y'all for joining me today. I know it had been a little while. We've been on about 2 hours. I got to go cook some food. I'm hungry. So I appreciate y'all for joining me. We'll have some more interviews going really soon. I know I say that all the time, but we will. Thank you again for joining.